live. Just check the chat room. I believe we are live. Yes, we are. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our 4th episode of Come Patch With Us. And I've got a couple of great guests with me who I'm going to introduce in a minute. If you haven't watched this before, this is basically a time where myself and a couple of guests join me and we open the doors to our studios and we talk about patching techniques, and I ask them to share some of their ideas and that kind of thing. If you're joining us live, you can get involved with this in the chat room, ask some questions in there. We're streaming live now on YouTube. And yeah, get involved. Thanks so much for joining us. And this is really, it's our Christmas special, if we can say that. It's only the 16th of December, but let's say it anyway. So yeah, it is our Christmas special because we've got 2 amazing guests who have managed to twist their arms to come on and give me some of their precious time. So thanks so much for joining us. I'll introduce them now. Who should we have first? Well, let's have the man, the legend, that is Ben, DivKid. If any of you have been... Hi, Ben. Thanks for joining us, mate. And if any of you are familiar with Eurorack at all, or modular synthesizers, or studio production, because he does more than that, you know, you will know about Ben. You'll know about DivKid. And I'm sure you'll have checked out his plethora of amazing videos. It's quite odd actually having him on the show, given that it was only a few years ago. I remember watching a first few of his videos and thinking, "Ooh, this looks pretty interesting. This is getting interesting." And here he is now. So thanks for joining us, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's been a pleasure to get to know yourself. Met at a couple of events a couple of times. And yeah, what's really interesting at the minute, just something I kind of want to praise the community for, as it were, is I've always tried to make videos that are educational. So even if you don't want, say, a filter that I'm demoing, I hope you can watch it and get something out of it for filters that you do own or a filter you might want in the future. And I think that tide's changing in that I'm getting more comments from people saying, yeah, I really don't like SEM filters. I want a Moog style filter, but I'm going to try these patches out on this other filter that I have, or I'm going to try this audio rate trick, or any of that. And I think it's all in the video titling. Because I make modular demos, it seems super niche. You know, if I put the lushest reverb in the world ever, ... and then did a reverb demo, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid, and I'd probably 10 times my views. But yeah, I'm not so into that. But yeah, just it's been a really good thing recently. I've had a lot of really good comments from people talking about what they've learned from it. People seem to be really soaking up information more than they have, or more than they've commented about anyway. So good on everyone for that.
Yeah, well, you know, thank you to as well, Ben. It is an education, and I suppose one of the main reasons I will go and watch some of your videos actually is like you say, they're educational. It's not just saying this is what the module does, but this is actually different ways of interpreting and using the module in a particular way, and often inspiring. And I suppose that's what you're looking for in a video is an inspiration and starting points and end points and that kind of thing as well. So
yeah,
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, no one was, I won't say no one was doing it, but when I really started going in for this, Raoul Penner, Raoul Words of Synths, was active. Myla Melodies had made a couple of videos just to sell a couple of filters that he wanted to get rid of. They were to accompany eBay listings. James Siegler had done a handful of really good things, but no one was really active. And I thought, you know what? I don't know anything about this, but it's really exciting. I'm just going to document everything as much as I can and share all the learning that I'm doing. And I'm great. All these people, Myler and James Siegler and people like that, are making more content too. But it's still just doing that effectively. And I'm really happy that I get to do that.
Well, it's great. It seems like everyone's getting their sort of little niches together, with Mylar doing his sort of Why We Bleeps and that kind of thing, which is really nice. And go check them out if you haven't checked out Mylar's recent videos on Why We... In fact, you're on the latest one, aren't you, Ben?
I am, yeah. That is like a 2 and a bit hour epic. But it's very production heavy, that one. We talk production techniques more than modular, I think, in that.
Cool, man. So at this point, just before I introduce the next guest, at this point I just usually ask you to run through what modules you've got with you, but given that you've got a wall of modules,
Yeah.
maybe you just want to pick out one or two favorites of yours, or any that you want to particularly just quickly talk about before I introduce the next guest and we get on with some patching.
Yeah, there's a few I'm happy to run through. I mean, the Mordax data, it's seen in every single video I do, but it's an incredibly stable clock source, very accurate clock source that you can CV modulate as well. So you can throw sample and hold into it and get this ratcheting, bursting, multiplying clock out of it, and then a really steady quarter note at the same time. It's also a dual waveform generator with volt per octave tracking. You can route two of the CV inputs to internal VCAs, and it will also now do wave folding as of a few months ago. So you've two wave shaping oscillators with internal VCAs. So throw two volt per octaves in, two envelopes in, and you've a great little digital two voice thing going on as well. So the
So
Mordax data,
this is the module we see
yeah,
basically on every one of your videos where
yeah,
you're using it. I thought it was just mainly as an
just the
oscilloscope.
scope. Yeah, so they're modes. There's oscilloscope, then there's spectrogram and spectrograph for FTTP frequency analysis stuff. But then yeah, there's a tuner on there. There's a clock generator on there. There's in the voltage monitor mode, which just monitors the four inputs, which is great if you're troubleshooting or calibrating modules. It will also give you accurate voltage outs. So if you think I just need a 5-volt signal to calibrate this octave switching or this tuning on an oscillator, I need a stable source. That is the thing to do it. Super reliable.
Wicked. I have to say, I personally don't have any kind of form of oscilloscopes or anything like that here in my setup. I've kind of done stuff by ear, but there is sometimes when I'm sat there and thinking, I really want to see what's going on here, just to make sure what I'm hearing, I think, is going on. If you know what I mean. Sometimes you need that reassurance visually that things are happening that you think are happening.
Yeah, and it's not a case of that. If I was trying to fine tune the modulation depth on a wave folder, I wouldn't look at it in the same way that visual equalizer plugins trick us in terms of production. You almost get a paint by numbers visual mixing aid, and it's good to just switch the monitor off and listen and use your ears. But that is really useful. It's a really useful module. Just one more that I'll shout out is Tuesday from This Is Not Rocket Science. It's an algorithmic melody generator or riff sequencer. It's basically, if people know Mutable Instruments grids, which does 3 channels of beats, typical kick, snare, hi-hat patterns, it's that for melodies. So it's kind of like a Turing machine on acid. Different quantizer modes. It's got a pitch output, a gate output, an accent output, a velocity output that's relative to the sequence. It's all very musical and intelligent. You get a tick output, which is typically a 16th, but it'll do quintuplets and triplets and stuff as well. It clocks really reliably. You basically turn an X and a Y knob and find a sequence that you like, and you're off. And then the bottom knob is the density of the pattern. So when you're building up, musical arrangement, you've got your peak sequence, as it were. And in production software in the DAW, a lot of people work on that big peak 8-bar loop, and then they strip elements back out. At least in dance production, you basically just turn the bottom knob down. I want this pattern, but less of it.
Wicked.
And you can CV it all. Really cool.
I think things like that for me, as soon as I start thinking about how I would use that, is maybe less so for melodies, because I'm always wanting to reproduce something. I guess you could record that into a CV recorder, but certainly sending that CV into something like a filter cutoff or something like that to come up with interesting shapes on your filters.
Yeah,
really good.
The interesting thing is it isn't random. I said like a Turing machine on acid. You put the knobs back where they were, and it's exactly what it was. So if you've got reliable voltage sources or pressure points or something like that, I guess a pressure point's a bad example because you could knock the knobs, but leave Tuesday set as it is. You've got something like an ER101 sequencer that's got multiple outs. Send it 3 or 4 voltages, it will give you that exact melody again.
Cool.
Really cool. And again, as a video demo tool, amazing. You want a great sequence? I don't really write sequences for demos anymore. I don't like that for my own music so much. I do like it for some things, and I've got some music that's done on that, but I still like composing, as it were. But it's great handing over musical duties to that thing.
Cool, man. Yeah, always looking for new ideas and ways of generating music and melodies and things like that. I've got a few different things. I use a lot of iPad apps myself for
Mm.
generating interesting melodies and what have you. I've got the Chord Bot, which was a Kickstarter campaign
Yeah.
from a few years ago now, I think, and I find that very interesting to use. Come up with a few ideas. I might record that down as MIDI and then kick it out to CV, that kind of thing. Record it into something so I can reproduce it basically.
It's
Um,
about that quick capture, isn't it? In terms
mm,
of a lot of my, 90% of my work is just demos. So I'm not fussed if I can't get a sequence back a lot of the time. But
yeah,
for music, I am. I absolutely want to be able to get it back potentially just for how I work.
yeah,
And it's
totally.
about that quick audio and information capture.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for that, and thanks again for being with us, Ben. We'll come
Yeah,
back to you in
cheers
a
for the
minute, and we'll
invite.
look at some. We'll get patching and what have you. There's quite a few people in the chat room right now, just saying hello to Inky and Paul, who regularly tune in for these. Thanks for coming in again. Our next guest is also a bit of a legend in the, well, not just in the modular world, but also mastering, mixing, and as a composer as well. Someone who's released a couple of great albums recently. Actually, I think this was maybe last year with the etudes, and actually you've just released something very recently as well, which is some of the kind of outtakes from those albums, I believe, which you can get for nothing at this moment in time. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Nathan Moody. Thanks for joining us, Nathan. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
All right. And you're joining us. Where are you? You're actually based in the US, right?
That's right. I'm in Northern California, just north of San Francisco.
Cool, man. Well, look, thanks so much for giving up your time to join us today. And yeah, is that right? You've just released some free music, which are outtakes from your Etudes output?
Yeah, so it's actually made with this guy right here, the what I call the blue box,
The
which is
blue box, that's what I
mostly
was trying to think of, because you did the blue and then you did the red, right?
right.
Yeah.
This this has been through a few holidays and has gained some weight. Um, but yeah, it was made with the blue box, and I just basically was going through some archives and came across some of my old sessions, and they didn't fit in the flow of the album, but they were kind of interesting, and some of them were a little bit more percussive than what was on the main album. So those are just on soundcloud.com/noise jockey, and they're free, so people can go check those out if they like.
Wicked. Brilliant. Where do we pick those up from?
Soundcloud.com/noise jockey, all
Noise
one word.
Jockey. Cool, man. So what else have you been up to? You've had a really busy year by the looks of things. You've been doing a lot of mastering, as well as your own music and things like that. You've been playing out live as well. Yeah, how's 2018 been for you? Seems been crazy.
It's been an interesting year with a bunch of firsts. Right now, I'm up to about having mastered about 40 albums. Most of those are ambient modular, but I've also done some punk stuff and some indie rock stuff. One metal track, which was fun, and I did do a brief tour of Germany, which was really fun. I actually got to play with Heinbach and Weber Jaspers of Coma Electronic in Berlin. Actually got to share a stage with Dieter Depfer in Munich. He is just like the nicest guy, and actually threw down the heaviest set of the night. We were all completely blown away. Um, and yeah, 3 or 4 albums this year, at least that many again coming in 2019. So yeah, it's been a really fun, very creatively rewarding year.
Cool, dude. Yeah, I just don't know where you guys find all the time between you. You're very, very busy people. Nathan, just give us a quick rundown of some of what your setup is there. You've got quite a lot, but again, do you want to choose a couple of key modules that you really like?
Yeah, so as you can tell, this is kind of Redbox V5, as things go in your rack, of course. Um, and what I've really liked about this system is there's one module that's pretty special. It's a verbose module, which I'll talk about. And then there's a couple of, the only module I have in here that I have duplicates of are a little known passive module that I'll talk about in a second. So the first, should I do the remote hovering shaky webcam?
Go for it.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
Whoa.
Here we go.
So the way I basically have my whole rig set up is that the first row here is all control. So mixer, sequencers and stuff. The next row is CV. The next row above that is largely effects and VCAs. And then the top row is all oscillators. And the first module to call out is probably this guy right here. And this is the verbose sequence selector. And a lot of people wind up getting confused by verbose modules because his descriptions are very, very sparse. And he really focuses on not telling you exactly what to do with it because they're very open-ended modules.
Sorry to interject. He sounds like a guy that needs some video demos.
Mark, if you're listening.
Sorry.
No, perfectly appropriate, actually. So this is a great example of that challenge because it can be a 5-stage sequencer, which of course is very Buchla-esque because most of his designs are derivative of the original Buchla designs. So that makes sense. You've got 5 steps. You can advance them with an external clock, as I'm doing here. But how I've got it patched right now is that you'll see you've got all of these inputs and every single one of them is filled. And that's because this could be a 5-stage, 2-channel switch. So what I love to do with this thing is actually have this top row be all gates, this bottom row be all unquantized CV. So this is a standard, this is a fixed CV here. This is a sequence. This is a complex LFO, and both of these are different flavors of random. And then if you clock the switch, then you get complete separate melody chains. And you can have as many of these as you want. You can use this top row to say, I only want it to have 4. So when you hit the 5th, go back to the 1st. You can enable and disable stages as well. So I find this to really be a big part of how I patch these days.
Is that called the sequential? Is that the sequential switch then?
Yes, the verbose sequential. Oh, sorry, it's called the verbose sequence selector.
Sequence selector. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a big thing for me. This winds up being my kind of my baseline generator, and so you can see most of these gates are coming from the Pamela's new workout sitting right next to it. And of course, a lot of these randoms are coming from one of the other verbose classics up here, which is the random sampling, which is also amazing because it's very much like the random module in the Buchla format, where you have 2 fluctuating randoms, 1 quantized, but then it also has a shift register with 4 slots, and it actually also generates white, pink, and metallic kind of 808 symbol style noise. So another thing I like to do with this is actually to, as I'm doing here with a Circuit Abbey Twiggy next to it, I'm actually a big fan of ring modding noise sources together for new timbres, usually high pass filtering it so it sounds more cymbal-like. But the only module I have in this whole rig that I have duplicates of is actually the cheapest modules in the entire rig, and it's these 2 guys. And these are from Studio Electronics, and it's just called the Router. And you can see I've got it next to a Variegate 4 here. And these are passive, they don't take any power, and all they do is you put a signal in, and then you can route it to one of 2 destinations. So the original Variegate 4 has no mute capability. So what I do is I use this as both a rerouting tool, but also just as a mute for each of the 4 voices, or sorry, 4 gate streams coming out of the Variegate 4. So in order to mute, I can just throw all of them over here if the second channel isn't going anywhere, or just throw them in the middle. So that way I can mute the gate stream as opposed to muting the audio.
That's great. So you'll have to excuse me, but when you play live, Nathan, are you able to reproduce the songs and the compositions that you've already recorded, or is your when you're playing live, is your approach very much improvised, let's say, with some elements of pre-recorded stuff or pre-programmed stuff? How's it work for you when you play live?
That's one of the reasons I don't play live that often, is because it's different every single time and it's almost entirely improvised.
Right.
I'm not a big, just what's not the idea of coming up with like a songbook that then gets played in a repeatable way, even with variations, to me as an artist just isn't that interesting. And so the way I do it is, I don't think I've ever played, except for the little mini tour of Germany, I've never played 2 live shows in a row with even the same rig.
Okay.
So this whole system basically is, I can sit at home and I can create a patch and I can rehearse it till the cows come home, but it allows me every single time to go out and play in an improvised way where I have a framework for where I might want to go. But in one show I might go to one place, and in another show it might be a little bit different. So.
Okay, it's interesting. I wonder how many modular performers out there are into that way of working. How many are very much into a songbook kind of way? I suppose a lot of people who get into this are maybe the former, because the reason they've got into working in this way is because they want it to be an exploration when they play live, just as much for themselves as it is for the people who are listening, in that you can very much improvise and work around a framework that you can set up with the modules, and then essentially improvise within that. So yeah, I wonder what that percentage is like amongst those that are performing out there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear people in the chat today if they want to comment on if they do it one way or the other. I think part of the challenge also with this format is that you would basically have to recreate your patch pretty much the same way every time, with variations, of course. But also for me, as not only as a performer, but as an audience member, the thing for me that makes live music worth seeing is an element of risk. And direct playback of the same thing over and over again, to me, feels less risky, as opposed to improvisation where everything might fall apart. If it does, will the audience know? Or can you spin it to seem purposeful? Will that lead you to a different entire last half of your set if there's a mistake or some sort of error? And so for me, it's that element of like, this all might fall apart at any moment. Like that kind of risk, to me, is what makes live performance so wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. It can make it really terrifying as well. There's that fine line. But I think as long as you know your system and you know the possibilities that you can extrapolate from that, because of the way you've set it up through the various mechanisms, using a sequential sequencer, and you're in control, then you should be able to enjoy it. Just make sure everything's in tune. What about you, Ben? You did. Wasn't it this year you did a gig at a festival with the children and the yoga thing going on?
Yeah, I've done one gig, so I can't speak with any real certainty or authority on playing live with Modular, but I played a lot of gigs in my time, and just occasionally do in bands and some electronic things, playing other instruments. But yeah, I tried to set up an environment that I could have fun with. So the gig itself was a yoga session. When I spoke to the yoga instructor before the gig, before the festival, I tried to get some idea of what goes on at a yoga session. What type of music do they use? Is it very meditative and ambient, or is it quite upbeat? And I just got a kind of single sentence email back that said, we go from soothing ambient sounds up to Justin Timberlake. And I was like, right, well, you're not going to get Justin Timberlake unless we plug a phone in with Spotify or something. So I thought, well, all right, that gives me some freedom. And being a festival, I just thought, right, I'll just get there really early, like an hour and a half beforehand. There was about half hour to set up. Luckily, Alex Myler Melodies was with me, and he stood out front and just said, "Mate, you just need to shave a ton of treble off this PA." I couldn't hear it from where I was. Great festival, but the Yoga Tent audio system, as you would imagine, wasn't equipped for modular or any kind of full range audio other than a bit of background sound, to be honest. So that was really useful to just go, right, we're just going to chill this right out, really ambient. Just let it drone and be meditative. And shoot, the yoga instructor was great, I should say, despite me having no idea what I was going to do really, other than some pre-patching. Well, the whole case was pre-patched, which we can get onto. She was very collaborative, looking over at each other, and as she's kind of saying and breathe and all these things, it was like, right, I can't change the music now because they're in a different pose, or it felt very collaborative. It was an enjoyable experience.
What would your approach be now then, Ben? If someone said, right, you've got a gig in February next year, you're going to come out and play live, what would you do? Would you choose a nice little 6 UK setup, go out, try and keep it all within one element, set, you know, semi improvise and semi learn some elements, just put together some choice modules basically, and just have that approach?
I'd like to try an ambient thing, and what was going to happen was do the summer gig, and then in November would have been Ross Lamon's event, but as Ross is getting out and making cases, and it didn't make much sense for him to put money into this event that he usually holds, I was going to play in November. So I've kind of been through this process and mindset, and I did a track on Din Records on Tone Science called Natural Minor Signs, and it was 4 modular voices, random choice of notes. It was just led by random sample and hold, but I used the Instro Harmonig as an interval generator, so I could force this random information into a nice key. It was just a natural minor key. All the voices are completely unsynced. There's not much sense of melody, so they're just free running looping envelopes, fading different note intervals in. So if you just get the 3rd and the 5th, it feels very different. And then the root comes in and stabilizes the chord, and that feels different again. And that was the majority of the patch. I wanted to have a patch that effectively was the track without having to be those exact pitches or timings. This idea of this random drifting chordal thing, very ambient, very effects driven, textural. And that was enough to kind of go, I think if someone would have seen it and they'd heard this track that was on Din Records, they'd have gone, okay, he's doing that. It would have had that's that song. Or if I'm hoping to put an album together of that stuff, I have a few tracks done, not quite exactly how I want just yet, but if they hear that in the future and then I do a gig, I think people will be able to go, oh yeah, he's doing that thing, that release, that song, that album, that EP, whatever it is. And then the rest of the set, I tried to just drift in and out, and it kind of worked. The yoga thing I had to slow right down. I did a couple of rehearsals that I've got filmed. I mean, if anyone's interested, ping me and you can have the links. They're just unlisted on YouTube. I won't make these public, I don't think, but because it's 2 50-minute rehearsals that I recorded before the yoga thing. And I like the second one. It's 50 minutes, but about every 5 to 10 minutes, there's a change. And the secret weapon was the morphogene. Just being able to go from patch to morphogene, through effects, play around. I had a lot of different noise sources in the radio music module, little bits of vinyl crackle, and just having vinyl crackle ping phasers and reverbs and delays creates a nice texture that you can sit in for a few minutes comfortably. And I think an audience would happily sit as well. It worked at the yoga thing. Maybe I'd have to be a little bit quicker at a gig where they're just stood going, he's done this for 5 minutes now. But that 50-minute set, you know, down to 30 or 40, I think would have been an enjoyable set. I went way overboard with the rest of the case. I took a 12U system out. I tried to do a 4-voice string thing, like a car plus strong string thing. Nightmare to tune, just way over the top. I quickly realized that just rings in stereo into the 4MS DLD. And building loops, because it's all clocked looping. The DLD is amazing. So just building loops and musical beds and layers. And again, that was led by Marbles. So very random led again, no particular note choices going on other than the quantization. And again, I think that would give a flavor. That would be enough for someone to go, okay, that's this piece or this idea. It wouldn't be the same track or melody though. maybe I would do that. I don't know.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
very.
What about you, Matt? I mean, like he was just talking about setting up chords, and I know Matt's the guy who has like 3 flats in his
Yeah.
rig.
Yes. I suppose one of the reasons I got into modular was the first thing I was quite fascinated with was polyphony and chords and things like that. And I've used a lot of the things like rings in the Easter egg mode that can produce chords. That's really nice. But what you're stuck with there is you're stuck with chords that basically you can either shift up and down, and you can change the voicing, but you haven't got the same kind of versatility and nuance that you've got with having, say, 3 different oscillators. So yeah, recently I got 3 of these micro plats made for me, which only arrived yesterday or the day before, and I've just put them in. I've actually just had a bit of a recable here. I've just started using these tendrils, which are amazing, and have just allowed me just to get to things here. So yeah, I've got these 3 plats here, which are essentially working as 3 voices, which allow me to do chords. They then run it. They all have their own envelopes from the Quadra, 1 each, and they all then go into the Tangle Quartet VCA, which obviously is controlled by the Quadra. They then go into a little stereo mixer, so I can have the first voice slightly to the left, second voice slightly to the right, and this one in the middle. And then I run them into the VCF, which is a great filter because you get this slight distortion with it. I don't know if you know this, but if the resonance is all the way off, it actually introduces some harmonic distortion into it, and you get this sort of very nice textural. Just kill the drums a second and the bass. So that's giving me some chords here. Let me just change the pattern. And hopefully you can hear me over the modular.
Yeah, it's good for me.
I've got octave switches for each voice, which is this is a cool little move. This is the Beast chalkboard, which I've actually stuck in on their sides in the 1U section here to free up some space. That gives me octave shifts, and I've got this 1U ATOF which goes into the harmonics dial for each of the plats, so I can vary the sound of them a little bit. Obviously I can also go through the different modes. I could choose different modes on each one of them if they want, and have them all playing different things. Might sound a bit wild, but just gives me a bit of variation. But for me, yeah, going back to playing live, I'm very much at the moment, because I'm working on an EP with the 12-inch coming out. My first 12-inch double A side's coming out just after Christmas. I'm working on an EP, and the idea is I'm going to go out and play that EP live. So I want to be able to reproduce these sounds. So it's very important for me that I've got something that I can reproduce those 3 or 4 tracks at least, but I can also take them into extended, semi-improvised mashups as well. So I've actually just moved to using the Pioneer Toraz SP16 as my main sequencer now. So I'm sequencing things on this. It also is great for throwing in loops in there as well, one shots, MIDI sequencing, and that connects to the FH2, which is here. I've got the FH2 and the expander. And this is generating CV, gates, envelopes, clock, and it's working at the minute. You know, everything's just nicely synchronized and playing nicely together, and it feels very performative as well.
What I like the idea of with that, Matt, I think you mentioned this on a Sonic Talk show a while ago, was that you might, you know, making this EP, you might make it on a certain amount of modules, or, you know, a bigger system or other cases. But the fact that you've had to find a way to, say, make every bass line be these two oscillators and filter or whatever you've got in the live case. I think that's a really interesting. I mean, we could do a whole hour on that, and we obviously there's other things to do, but just this idea of, you know, I use these oscillators into this Schwayman filter and whatever else, and it was a whole roll, this amazing bass sound. You've only got a couple of rolls to take to a gig, so it's kind of like it's going to be different. And I think there's still an element of risk in it. I mean, I think there's an element of risk in any kind of modular performance. You know, having the sequences preset, you know, melodies you can recall on sequences, that's only a minor part of it. I think taking out a modular live.
Absolutely. I think when you're watching anyone playing live with a modular, you're watching someone who's invested quite a number of hours in rehearsing and technically putting things together using. I mean, I spend more time on Modular Grid than any website. You know, you look at my browser history, it's just a Modular Grid, hours and hours and hours just planning around, because I'm just trying to get everything into 7U at the minute, because I've got some gigs already lined up in the US as well, so I'm going to be flying. So the idea is the SP16 in my backpack, the modular under my arm, which is going to go on the plane with me, and then my clothes can just go in the, you know, the hold all or whatever. And I'm nearly there with it. I had these two cases behind me rocking. So I had this case over here, which I was running the Hermod, and I had the hex mix and the hexpander, and I was going to do all the mixing there. But I can pretty much just do it all now. I've figured it out in the 7U behind me. Don't look at this bit over here. This is the sort of unused section.
The graveyard.
The graveyard that I'm pretending is not there, which has got like a Schwayman in it, and the 301 and an Eloquencer, and yeah, I got to sort that out.
Just another quick one on that, and we've spoke about doing a live stream over on my channel as well, and I'll save a lot of these questions for that in the new year. We'll do a show. But how do you feel the sound of this EP, or your music in general, has changed having to use the same modules? Because you could labor over this huge case of layering up sounds and all this thing. You can't take that out live. So maybe all of your bass, I imagine, is the same oscillator, filter, distortion combo. The chords you said they're all going to be plats, but they might not have been for the EP. Has it had quite a unifying effect to the music? Does it kind of either does it do that at all? And if it does, is it too much? You know, is an hour of the same bass patch, same chord patch? Is that too much? Is it kind of, how's that work?
Good question. I guess it's enabled me to start looking at and building my sound, and I want people to go, oh yeah, I'm going to go see him because he does. I'm getting very much into distorted bass and a lot of stuff to do with bass and reverbed bass and delayed bass and that kind of thing. So I want to get that sound in the same way that you go watch Guns N' Roses because Slash has got a particular sound, or Axl Rose, you know, Tombroux's voice. But what I've made sure I've done is I've built things in so I can pull out still lots and lots of different timbre. So with the bass, for example, with the bass, I've got my main VCO, but it runs into this filter which allows me to add extra harmonic content using the waveforms on the input and the drive, and I also then run it into a distortion unit separately, and I can mix between the two, and they've both got their own filters. So between them, I can pull out quite a lot of sounds from them, but it's still hopefully it becomes a recognizable sound. So that's just the Sonic XV here. And there's loads of different sounds I can get just by turning this one dial, the in wave. Then there's pulse width, I can play around with. Now I can bring in the distorted version. I can mix the two together. They actually then go into a compressor to keep them both kind of squishing together, which is really useful to stop one sort of getting too pokey, and then they both run into a filter. I pass and low pass. So I can get quite a lot of stuff out of it, basically. But I'd like to think that I'm creating a sound for myself, and that sound is very much very bass driven, very hard driven. Having done a lot of ambient stuff, like you was talking about, I've done ambient stuff before and played live, and people start, it doesn't matter where you go, people are going to stand there and they're going to chat and they're going to have a pint, and you're going to be playing, you're going to be doing this really nuanced part of your set that you've worked an hour on just to get this like really intricate sound, and someone's like chucking glass bottles in the bin, and I want to overcome that. Basically, I want to be in charge sonically when I'm playing live. So that's the goal right now. You want to command their attention. Yes.
One thing that I found traveling internationally, which I did for the first time recently, is was when you travel internationally, it's more weight than size that you have to fight against, with the maximum weight of what can go in the overhead bin. And I found that when I traveled domestically with this case, for a 45-minute set, 5 kilograms of cables. No, sorry. That's not right. I got that backwards. 2 pounds of cables, 2.5 pounds of cables. And that's one of the reasons why I'm starting to, like you, Matt, also use tendrils, because they're much thinner.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think that would be a big deal, but I did the math, and just playing in another city here with this rig with a couple of other pieces, I was carrying around like 60 or 70 pounds, like I'm going mountain trekking, just to get from my hotel to the venue, and that gets old really fast.
That's crazy. That is crazy. I've not thought about that at all, really. I mean, I did obviously thought about it with cases. These are the cases I use, and a lot of people do email me and ask what I use. And these are the Ross Lamond DIY cases, which I built myself. They just came flat packed, and I built. He did me a favor though, Ross, bless him. He made the lids, which you just put on. He made them a lot shallower for me, because I know I'd be going to these right-handed cables, so I could actually have a lot more of a shallower lid. But that's a very, very light case when you take everything out. But it's also very strong, very sturdy. But I've not actually thought about the weight of the cables as well.
It can add up in a shocking way.
Yeah.
Just really quick, one little thing about holding people's attention and ambient gigs, just 'cause I'm watching the chat and it's kind of popped up about, hit them with a big fat kick and get their attention. This one way, obviously. Robin Rimbaud, Scanner, did a great set at the Modular Meets Leeds event that I hold, so you can say I'm biased if you want, but it's not about me. Robin's set, and he started this ambient set just with this voice of just sounded like from an old film, kind of typical lo-fi old vocal sample, but I think it was just saying, "Are you listening?" And he just asked Phil, the sound guy, to just bring it up fairly slowly, and it's just, "Are you listening?" and then a breath, and then, "Are you listening?" and a breath, and it just commanded everyone's attention. It's that kind of thing of,
right,
you're in school and the teacher's told you to shut up and one person's still talking and everyone's staring at them. It just drew everyone in. And the set that he did, again, these are all on my channel, so pushing out my own videos and stuff, but Robin playing in the Barcelona event, Bafaco's event back in September, just completely commanded everyone's attention from an ambient set. And I guess all I'm really saying is just bigging up Robin effectively. Yeah. But he was one of the only people I've seen with that style of music completely command people's attention. And the use of the voice to start the set, at modular events where there's performances, I walk around everyone and go, right, can everyone just turn their systems off? We're going to have a performance in a minute, or I'll get on the mic and say something stupid or whatever. We didn't need to for Robin. The room settled itself within a couple of minutes.
Brilliant.
Then he should have hit them with a fat kick.
Or he should have rickrolled them. And just gone into Rick Astley or something. So All right, look, we've had a good chat about quite a lot of interesting stuff there, and I'm aware of the time. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to come back to you guys, and the main thing about this show is not just to give something back to the community and us be here and talk. And thanks for everyone who's joined us live, but also just an opportunity for us to kind of go right. Ben, Nathan, what interesting ideas have you got for some patching techniques that you can share with us? And people in the chat room obviously can get involved and ask some questions and what have you. So, Ben, maybe we'll jump to you straight away if that's okay.
Yeah,
I know you've sent me some pictures of some patches and some ideas and things like that. So, do you
yeah.
want to start and just run us through something you've got?
Yeah, so this patch, I'll just run through the general idea, and then as I kind of turn around, if you can pull the image up, because you won't see much with where my webcam's set up.
Okay.
It's about this thing that people will have heard a lot about, which is effectively decoupling the rhythm from the pitch sequencing. And by doing that, getting more voices out of a system. So this is Tuesday that I mentioned earlier, one algorithmic sequence. That pitch sequence, in the case of the image on screen, goes to the graphic VCO from Erica Sims because, well, A, it sounds great, but there's two outputs, and one of them can be a sub from anywhere from the same note right down to 2 octaves below. So making that 2 octaves below and having it play the same pitch, but then sending the sub out in one kind of direction of processing and sending the main out that's 2 octaves higher than the sub down another patch of pathway of processing, allows you to create these two kind of opposing rhythmic patterns over the same musical information. The actual demo I'm going to play, because I couldn't grab the graphic VCO, it's actually with someone else. I realized when I was trying to get it in the case for this tonight. I've used two separate oscillators. So they're both playing the same pitch, but one is 2 octaves lower than the other. The bass is then very subtractive. It goes into a nice filter. It's got its own envelope for the filter and VCA. And it's just playing the accent pattern on the sequencer, which is a sparser version of the main gate rhythm. So the bass is the less busy of the two patterns. The top line then goes to low pass gate. In this case, it's the natural gate from Rabbit Elephant, but any low pass gate would do. It's more about the concept than the specific modules for me with this. And then those two channels, one of them is just struck by a 16th note. So I've got kind of a fast little ticky, clicky version, quite a short envelope on it. And the other takes the main gate rhythm. So I'm getting these two lines playing off of each other from one sequence. You could patch the rhythms out to clock dividers or logic or any kind of other rhythmic sequencer, completely use a different rhythm sequencer to your pitch sequencer and kind of chop in and out of this musical information with different gates and rhythms. And then the second part of the patch is the effects routing. I've gone with a hex mix so that I can route effects back into channels so that I can EQ them, but then importantly run them back out either to themselves to create a feedback loop or back onto the other effects. If I would have brought the effects out of the send and back into the returns, they'd just come out of the master out. I wouldn't be able to EQ them. I wouldn't be able to send the delay send back into the reverb, but EQ it on the way. So it's kind of created this nice effects chain, if you like. People can try and follow those cables on screen, and I'll just play a little bit. I'll start with the bass, and then I'll bring the voices in, and then the effects just for a minute. So that's the sparser bass pattern, and then the top line on top. I could swap out the top channel for the kind of little 16th note one instead. And then they're feeding a couple of delays and a reverb, but if I want to do something like route all the effects through each other, so I'll just turn the voices down a bit and the effects up.
Could bring the sound up a little bit of the modular if you can, Ben. Lovely.
So yeah, it's a fun little thing. It's one sequence. There's effectively 3 parts to it, and the effects will all route in and out of each other. I like having an effect as well, that a bit like having a dirt mic when you're recording, kind of a room mic recording drums that you smash the hell out of and just blend a little bit underneath of for kind of weight and character. I'm using the Coma reactor from Animal Factory Amplification as my kind of dirt delay, which is this sound. It's just kind of that layer of filth. But having the EQ on the mix is perfect because I can just get the top end into it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed about using, because I've got the Hex Mix and the Hexpander, which I really like, is you can just push stuff just by adding that little bit of treble on or mid-range on stuff to make it push through the mix a little bit more, particularly with reverbs and delays, which can sometimes get a little bit lost.
Yeah. I mean, it's like in this patch here, I've got the bass and the other sounds. All right, they're 2 octaves up from each other, but they're pretty rich oscillators still. So they've got just that bit of low end shaved off. Makes a huge difference. All the effects returns, I'm sending the bass into reverb, which is something you mentioned, having these wide reverb basses. As long as it's not like sub 150 hertz that's going into the reverb, I think you can do whatever you want. It can be this super wide, rich bass. You just want to high pass it a little bit beforehand and then blend the dry back in the low end.
Yeah.
And you can do that here. The bass into the reverb, for example. You know, it's a splash of color. It's a wet bass sound, but it's not a muddy low end by any means.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're using bass, I think they tend to go, oh yeah, you shouldn't really put reverb on your bass and delays and stuff like that. But actually, I don't know. Who says no? You know, never say never to these sort of things. I think you can just treat it, add some delays and reverb to pretty much anything you want. It'd be quite interesting. Bass, but I suppose with bass you have to be careful. You might accumulate a lot of low end accidentally and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's being mindful of. I think we say delay on a bass. You know, any guitarist that's picked up a bass has probably tried to strum a low chord and gone, "Oh God, that sounds horrible." You realize that E major shape or whatever that you play on a guitar doesn't work an octave down on a bass guitar. You can very easily build up notes that don't work nicely. You know, anything that's not like a root fifth an octave below a certain frequency tends to just clash really nastily. And a delay can let that happen. You know, if you've an F pedaling away and then you go up to an F sharp or a G and they're all muddied in this delay trail, even when you high pass that, it's still pretty nasty. Our ears do an amazing job of, if you listen to a high passed waveform, even without hearing the high pass sweep, your ears fill in the blanks. You know, if I sent you a recording of a saw wave that I've high passed at 400 hertz, you'd still know and perceive that as a low pitch, which is weird because you haven't heard it. You haven't heard that information. And that happens in these effects trails as well, really easily. You kind of perceive more mud than is there.
Well, and that's because if you hear like the 4th or 5th harmonic, say 4th harmonic, if you then hear very clearly the 6th, the 8th, 10th, and the 12th, then your brain is like, oh, I'm just hearing the upper harmonics of this, that you're actually not even perceiving. Whereas if it's just distortion or a mix of even and odd, then you can't really tell what that fundamental pitch is. But this is also a great, it's like you teed this up for me, Ben.
Go for it.
One of the things that me and my friends joke about when it comes to stereo bass is that I spend more of my time as a phase engineer than a mastering engineer. And I totally agree that there's no rule saying you can't have bass into reverb or delay. But as Ben said, as long as it's high pass filter, there are 2 issues. Matt, you mentioned one. You can just get a huge buildup of sub bass harmonics that eats into headroom, that isn't emotionally moving the track forward, and that can just be cleaned up. But the other issue is too much bass in the side of the signal will create phase correlation issues, where if you hit mono, your bass could disappear. And so that's why a little bit of EQing or high pass filtering on the sends or returns, and doesn't have to be super extreme either, can really help widen that bass and make it feel crazy immersive without necessarily getting into some of those technical problems.
Yeah, just a quick thing to pull on what you said there, Nathan. Just I've been doing in production stuff for a while, and having this kind of mixing in modular is great for the idea of either pre or post EQ on an effect. That gets talked about a lot with compression. Do I EQ before or after the compression? And people say, well, do the corrective stuff before the compression so it doesn't have to react to the stuff you don't want. Do the creative stuff afterwards, the nice bit of air or bit of a subshelf or something. But an effect will react differently from what you send into it. So even if you send it to your reverb and then cut a load of bass out, that bass has still been exciting that effects chain. And it's a very different sound cutting it before or after. And again, no right or wrong. Either can be great, but very different.
Yep. And in fact, it's how that happens is the reason, if I can get this over far enough, maybe I can't, is there are these two little black modules. Boy, my camera's not long enough. I actually have a pair of simple EQs from Funk after clouds. And for this very reason. But I like in this patch, they're after, because I actually want clouds to kind of distort from the amount of bass going in. But I don't want that to create technical problems. So that's the joy of modular, though. All it would take is swapping 4 patch cables, and I can do it the other way. And then it's just a matter of flavor at that point, which is cool.
The other thing with bass, and then I'd love to hear what you've got, Nathan. I'm aware of the time as well. Is that when things were all cut to vinyl, it would make the needle jump out of the record. If you had a big spell of bass on one side or the other, it would throw the needle out of the groove. So 200 hertz, maybe higher, tended to be mono, or at least that's kind of the thing I was brought up on in terms of my production education.
Yeah, I find it varies. It could be anywhere between 80 to 350 depending on the track. So
yeah. But in terms of for vinyl, it was always kind of you do not have stereo bass. Right. It was like this, absolutely do not do this.
That was the key thing, actually. Listening back to the test pressings of my vinyl, my bass was stereo. It had delays and reverbs on it, and suddenly it was mono, and I was like, oh, what's happened? I hadn't listened to vinyl for a long time. I went out and bought a record player and some new speakers and everything, sat down, thought, great, I'm going to hear my tune on vinyl for the first time. And it just sounded small. And I was just like, I mean, it sounded great. I'm still happy with it. But compared to the digital recording, it's a different experience completely, just because of what they've had to do.
Yeah.
But I guess, on reflection, you just learn from these things and you think, okay, well, am I making music for a particular medium now? Is it mainly for digital? Will it work on vinyl? Is there any point in putting things on vinyl? And then, but I've played it to people, and I've even heard it on the radio back to back with other electronic acts, and it stands up still playing off vinyl. So it was a bit of a shock, but you do have to be mindful of that. These things will change if you're going to get things put on vinyl. So
yeah, just one last thing from me before I'd love, as I said, love to hear from Nathan as well. I'm aware of the time. I'll record some audio and video with this patch before I pull it down as well in the next couple of days. So if anyone wants to hear it in a bit more better quality or close-up shots, come back onto my channel. I'll put something up this week.
Thanks, Ben. One of the things that really struck me about your patch just then, Ben, was just the bass sound itself. And this AJH mod, let me share your patch again. Hang on a second.
So it's the mini mod oscillator. It's a single oscillator. Saw wave into the transistor ladder filter. So it's effectively a Model D, as close as you're going to get.
Which is close you get. And it just sounds, so musical. It sounds so rich, harmonically rich. I've used it before. Alan actually sent me one to have a play with. I didn't get time to do much with it, unfortunately. It was a busy time. But I was really struck about how it worked over so many octaves, and how musical it was, how rich it was, combining some of those waveforms together. It was just great. And I'm hearing that even over the web.
Yeah, in this image you've got up, it is the graphic VCO. So that would have been wavetables, and the effects on the graphic VCO only affect the first output. So I could have done some cool FM, AM type stuff on the higher channel, and it wouldn't have affected the sub. which with AM, where I wouldn't have got any of the kind of detune you get with
That's
FM,
right.
it would have been
So,
a really great different set of tones, but I went with a couple of AGH oscillators for this.
And the mini mod as well, that particular filter, I haven't used that one, but I did a video. I was really struck by this. Just from a whim, I just decided to go and buy the Sonic XV filter, which I've just been speaking about a little bit, and this thing is just crazy good. You can really push the input into it and introduce extra harmonic content, and then you've got this waveform that you can apply to it and kind of modify that as well, and you can get all these other tones out of it. It's such a musical filter, and teamed up with the Schweiman VCO6 as my main bass oscillator, I think it's so important finding a filter and a VCO combo that just work really well together, and particularly for bass, something that's going to be so solid in your track. It's really important that you find something that can work really well together. I just think, and that's a killer for me.
Yeah, that Sonic XV, I will shut up in a second, I promise. It's got wave shaping on the input, so you don't have to be filtering out harmonics. You can put a triangle into that, which isn't, you tend not to patch triangles into filters, but you can fold it and shape it on the input. And then the resonance has a whole wave shaping circuit in it as well. And it's also a great diode ladder filter, which is a little bit more, it's got that diode 303 thing, but it's not very acidic. It's a different tone. Based on the Sonic 5 or the Sonic 6, the old Moog unit. I'd presume 6 being the name of the filter. But yeah, it's got this great diode filter and wave shaping on the in and wave shaping on the resonance. I think AGH is seen as a bit of an East Coast, very Moog driven kind of thing, but I'd say that's very kind of East Coast in nature. Add a ton of harmonics, but then also be able to filter them out. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm absolutely blown away with it. Before that, I was using a Tip Top Z2040, which I just really liked because you could really distort the input on it, particularly for bass, and it just got really nasty. But this stays a little bit more musical, and with all the wave folding, yeah, I just think it's very important to find those modules that work together musically in those ways. That's all. Particularly, when we're talking about sound here rather than Logic modules and things. All right, cool, man. Thanks very much, Ben. Nathan, let's fly over to you and see what you've got going on there. What you've prepared for us, or what you'd like to talk about, mate.
Sure. I'm going to blame my lack of audio on my increasingly repressive government. Who clearly does not want you to hear what I've prepared for you today. So like Ben, I will absolutely shoot both video and audio of the principles. I'll walk through real quick. But what's cool about where Ben started is even trying to prepare to play for 45 to 60 minutes at a time with this setup, I too have really, over the last year, focused on how to evolve timbres and evolve voices in a way that Ben was doing really, really beautifully on that little patch that he shared. So we can walk through some of that stuff. And I'll make sure to provide Matt links for show notes.
Yeah, I'll stick that in the description of this video when we've got those.
Perfect. So I think probably the physically biggest module, maybe even bigger than the performance mixer in my rack, is the Verbose harmonic oscillator, which is a true additive synth. It works, kind of like a drawbar organ in terms of its synthesis engine. And what's cool about it is it actually has both a linear and an exponential CV input. And what I've got patched here, which I'll share audio with later, is I'm actually taking pink noise out of the random sampling. And that pink noise is going into the linear FM of the harmonic oscillator. And what's fun about that is that it allows me to introduce it sounds like distortion, but the character's super different. So when it's at, 9 o'clock to noon, it really adds this hair to the signal. Since it's linear FM, it doesn't quite sound like traditional FM because I'm not FMing it with another oscillator. It's still audio rate. But what's cool is once the attenuator goes from noon towards its maximum full throw, the timbre becomes very metallic, and it can morph this the timbre of this module from something that's very sweet and beautiful and melodic to something that literally is a percussion voice with one knob throw. So it's really cool. I'm trying to find that for live performance and even studio patching. There's the idea, of course, and ever and always, morphing your patches so that the sounds don't get stale, but morphing from a percussive voice into a melodic voice or vice versa is a great way to really kind of play with listener expectation in a way, and it makes it a lot less predictable and makes it really fun. You can even orchestrate drops just by one knob throw, which is kind of cool. So I'll be demonstrating that later on. Probably the most egregious use of HP real estate in this patch is I'm using the Verbos complex oscillator as a kick drum. So world's biggest kick drum module. But what's cool is that when you do that, you can FM it, you can wavefold it, you can AM or FM these two pieces together in any way you want. You can send an envelope, as I am, into the modulation index, so that way the timbre decays over time instead of pitch or volume, which is cool. So I'll be doing some demonstrations with that. If you're doing something like techno or electro and the kick is that important of a voice, suddenly taking up that much screen real estate almost kind of strategically makes a lot of sense. Another classic trick I think a lot of us do, but it's worth talking about if I can get around the cable mess here, is this is an Optimix from Make Noise, and just the idea of going from a low pass gate and just opening up the low pass gate to turn it into a drone and then back to low pass gate. Ben was doing some of that already in his patch earlier today, and that's a really great kind of transitional element. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we've got everything going into clouds, and that's being EQ'd post effect, and I'll show some drive effects of that as well. And then finally, the last two things I will include audio of are, as we started at the head of the show, talking about the sequence selector and how I'm using that as a 2-channel 5-stage switch. And also, I'll do a little demo of dealing with the sequence, the voltage multi-stage as a live performance sequencer. All this stuff is running out to a pair of 2 HP tunes. So all the outputs of this and all the outputs of this are being quantized to the same scale. So that's kind of the basis for this general performance patch. And I'll definitely be sharing all sorts of audio examples of that as soon as I can.
Cool, man. So I was quite interested about the kick drum. Like you say, it is a lot of real estate for that much, but it's very important for this style of music if you're doing techno and stuff. So do you find within when you're playing and performing stuff, you're changing the kick drum quite a lot over time?
I look at these as almost like if my patch is a story, the kick drum is like the location where the story happens. So I might change it slowly over time as transitions, but once I land on a sweet spot, it'll stay there for a chapter. And then once that starts to wear out its welcome, I'll pull the other elements down, come up here, start to kind of affect it, and then we're kind of at another location, and then ripple effects in terms of timbres up here and sequences down here will shift accordingly. So I usually only shift this maybe 4 to 8 times during the set based on what I'm doing. But the primary the primary core frequency of the kick drum will never change, because that's kind of locked into whatever I'm doing for the rest of the entire set in terms of musical key.
Okay. Yeah, so tuning your kick drum as well to the key of the song at times, or
Yeah.
even, I suppose that also gives you the opportunity, and I've done this before, when you turn up to a room and you're sound checking, you can sometimes tune your kick drum to that, the kind of room has got its own mode, if you like. That's the
Yeah,
right word.
very much so. I think if you're going to take the approach of kind of an 808 style kick with a really long, very clear pitch, long release kind of thing, then tuning it to the song becomes more important, because you're going to hear it ring out like an oscillator. But certainly, if it's shorter and you're adding in enough harmonics that the bass pitch, like a proper normal kick drum, isn't quite as perceptible, then tuning it to the whole room is probably more effective.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, Ben, you're a drummer as well, aren't you? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, Ev, but my past experience, my background has been working in recording studios in and out of London with some really great bands over the years. And one of the main things we'd usually do is tune the kick to the root note of the song, the snare to the root of the song, and then your toms to maybe like thirds and fifths and things like that. Is that something you've been mindful of as a drummer, but also within electronic music as well?
Yeah, I've gone through that in phases. I mean, the drum, often the acoustic drums, they're so muted. If it's, just you want that kind of thumping rock thing where it's muted, maybe not even bottom skins or front skin on the kick. There's not enough note and length of a pitch to really realize. But certainly have tuned before, just by ear. It's not anything I've really measured, because as the beta hits the skin, the actual air is lesser and it's expanding, and that's where this kind of idea of using a pitch envelope to modulate that and make that on a modular or on any synth comes from. If that pitch envelope, as Nathan said, never actually kind of sits on one level, it just kind of sounds faded out before the pitch is really leveled out. It doesn't matter too much. As Nathan said, I just tune to the environment I was in. Turn up to a gig and just tweak it a bit, where it just really gave me some good punch, because you're doing a gig and they're all in different keys. You just kind of find line of best fit, effectively. And then it came about with the kind of EDM explosion in the States. It was making a lot of more commercial dance music for TV and things, and it was, your bass drum's got to be in tune, and it was like, well, it doesn't. In fact, the first place that it really kind of messed with my work and was a spanner in the works was making sample packs. All of a sudden, Sample Magic and Loop Masters and CR2, it's a house label that released through Beatport, every kick had to have a note on it. So it was like EDM kick number 1, F sharp, EDM kick number 2, G.
Okay.
And they were different kick sounds, but you had to give them the tonal center. I'm like, well, it doesn't have one. I haven't put a sustained period in that pitch envelope, so I'm not even going to put one on. It's stupid. So I think it does go too far sometimes, but then again, in situations with the 808 or anything like that, it's horrible if it's out of tune. If it's this big booming bass drum and it's not right, or it doesn't particularly have to be the same note, but a fifth against the root note of the bass line or something like that tends to work quite well. Any typically stable harmonic interval works. But it's been really up and down.
I agree. I think that the key of J is what I tune all of my drums to. I find that's very effective.
Well, I was going to ask then, Nathan, because so you're tweaking your kick drum and you've got your bass line. So are you listening out for any differences in frequency, and you might start pitching one to another and that kind of thing? Because you mentioned you use the Optimix as well, and you might open that up to get just sustained notes and things like that happening. So obviously, if you've got sustained maybe bass and you've got a kick drum with a long decay on it, is there anything you might do to remedy that, or are you just playing around with it essentially until you get it to sort of gel together?
That's a great question. I tend to think of things as kind of like mutually effective, and I try to always balance what's coming out of the rig, both in terms of harmonic space and time. So if I've got a bass pad that's like a drone, then I'm going to start opening up the Optimix to change, say, a really quick chopped melody line or clipped kind of melodic line into something that's languorous and gets really, really drawn out and more drony. I will actually I'll attenuate the bass line while I'm doing that, because then all of a sudden kind of like the temporal characteristics of two voices are becoming similar. So I'll fade one out, and it's kind of like a natural drop or ebb in the energy. So what I try to do is I try to have, for every voice, I try to mentally map temporal divisions as well as frequency divisions and make sure that two voices aren't doing the same thing in either of those axes.
Okay. And that's really interesting, man. And I'd just like to just quickly talk about the harmonic oscillator. Now, I've just got it up on the screen here as well. Just share it for people who are watching. But I managed to spend some time. I was lucky enough to spend some time with James Holden, modular wizard himself, and he uses the harmonic oscillator, and he's using it for quite top-endy kind of timbre and that kind of thing. He certainly don't think he's using that for the low end sort of stuff. How do you find that this fits into your into the frequency ranges that you're using? Are you using this for a lot of top end stuff?
It varies per patch.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Mr. Holden's, and I think that I can hear some of that stuff in his work. And I think one of the ways that it actually excels as a bass element is that since you have all of the quote unquote drawbars, the harmonic levels, and the fact that you can modulate where all those go, it can really help a bass patch punch through or even be reproduced on small speaker systems or compromised earbuds. So kind of almost coming back to how we started with Ben's comment, if you can just bring out just a few of those upper harmonics in a bass line,
right,
even if you're on a system or in an environment where you can't fully hear that ripping low end, you still can follow the melodic progression of it. And so I find that actually as a mix strategy for bass lines, I actually use the harmonic oscillator for that more than high lilting melodic lines. But I absolutely do both.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's really interesting to hear. Yeah, I've not thought about using it in that way, and you know, bringing out that upper mid range there for your bass to make it punch through and just give that clarity. And I suppose this is a question to you both as well, about, because we talked a lot about performing live here, which is, you know, it's such a bizarre thing when you finally get up there and you've done all the rehearsing in the world, and then you start playing. All sorts of things could go wrong. But I suppose one of the really important things is you need to be able to hear yourself. And I'm just wondering, have you used in-ear? I think it was easy for you, Ben. You was using a PA, but maybe more for you, Nathan. Are you using in-ear monitoring so you can hear what's going on more accurately for mixing stuff, or are you happy using wedges and that kind of thing?
I'm using them right now.
Yes.
I actually am using my favorite company for this is called Jerry Harvey Audio, and that actually has my name on it because these are custom molded. So
okay.
Really cheap, really, to go to an audiologist and get the impressions made.
Yeah.
And I hated playing live until I got these, and they naturally attenuate by 25 to 26 dB just because of the fit.
Wow.
And so the other side of that is that you're isolated from the environment, and your playback levels are so much lower.
Okay.
You're not trying to overwhelm anything, so it protects your hearing in that way as well.
Yeah.
Only once have I been at a show with like Meyer sound monitors, which are freaking amazing, but that's one show out of many. And so now I've got these, and I'll let the front of house engineer worry about tuning for the room, but now I have true reproducible consistent monitoring every show everywhere. The only
Right.
problem, if you use these for entertainment listening, you kind of can't eat with these things in. It's really strange.
Yeah.
And for you, Ben, I guess you was using the PA when you played. We did your yoga sesh.
I had these. So these are just
Ah.
the trusty old Sennheiser HD25s.
25s.
I know that they're not, you know, I've started, I don't profess to have done anywhere near the breadth of work that Nathan has for mastering, but I've started masters on these and been quite happy when I've gone back to a better environment that I was moving in the right direction. I know them like an old school friend. Just so I've got another pair. As soon as I started putting out work that I was professionally happy with, and you'd hear it on TV and think, I just did that in HD25s. I was like, I'm going to buy another couple of pairs because when these break, I don't want any breaking anything. You know, they're not great. I wouldn't advise them for someone wanting to mix or even really particularly just listen and jam on the modular. They're not meant for that, but I know them so well at this point. I was touring on an electronic drum kit around Europe with a band, and it would be just cheap earplugs because I needed to get the click so loud in the headphones.
Yeah.
And then I had a blendable amount of myself and click in the headphones, and I would, you know, one ear on, one ear off for the rest of the band. There was some acoustic players as well, and that worked. You know, we were lucky. I forget her last name, but we had a sound girl called Anna. She was so good. Like that, you know, you'd go and there'd be really bad monitors, and you're like, oh, we can't do this. Like an acoustic band can kind of balance themselves on stage, and the vocals will be an issue, but they can kind of get their amps at a workable level for themselves. You can't do that when you're on electronic kit, drum kit, and keyboard. Because it's like I didn't take an amp. It was like we need a monitor. We need to hear these drums on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, we did one gig. I mixed the whole gig in these headphones because it was a club in London. I forget the name. And we turned up and we went, where do we plug in? And they'd only ever had DJs before. It was great audience. You know, promoters did a good job in that regard. But they just said, you've got a stereo RCA in on the Pioneer desk. You know, it was just CDJs and whatever 900 the mixer was at the time. Again, a Pioneer thing. So it was like, right, I need to have live vocals, bass, acoustic bass through a DI, or electric bass, sorry, through DI, an electric guitar into this sound card, mixed with my audio and sent out into that stereo thing. And it coped an old MacBook and an old M audio card, and we managed to get the latency workable. Like there was only really me that could tell any difference.
Right.
We managed to play, and the players were good enough to react and sit back or forward on the beat as they needed, and it worked. So it's another one of these things with these headphones. I'm like, actually, if I just wedge some earplugs in and use these and just crank the volume safely because there's earbuds in underneath,
yeah,
it did the trick. But I'd suggest going Nathan's way. If you get a great pair of in-ears, there's a couple of really top mastering guys working in ears now. If you get to know those that really show you what you're listening to, not HD25s, I think, you know, you can work anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Now, I want to hear what Matt's take on this issue is, but one thing I will follow up with on what Ben just said is that it almost doesn't matter how much money you pay on monitors as long as you really feel like you know them well. Like HD25s will work absolutely brilliantly as long as you know how that's going to translate onto other systems. And, you know, no sound reproduction system is truly flat and truly transparent. It just doesn't exist. And so knowing your monitoring environment and chain is, I would argue, as important as having a good one.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree anymore, mate. That's exactly what I'd say. Basically, is you've got to know what you're hearing. And I run General X in here, and they've took me a long time to get used to. Actually, before that, I was using event monitors. I was a big fan of those. I think they're quite big in the US, but not so much in the UK. But I really like those. But there's a lot more detail in this, and that took me a long time to get into. I was actually making my mixes a lot duller than they needed to be, just because there was a lot more presence in the mid-range in these. And when I realized I was compensating for that, which is often what you're doing is compensating negatively by maybe reducing or adding on too much particular frequencies because you're not understanding what's going on basically, and also where you're putting them in the room and that kind of thing. But it's super important in the same respect that you need to know the modules as well. I can watch your videos all day, Ben, and I can buy these modules and I plug them in, but if I've not got a kind of a meaningful relationship with that module in terms of how I'm using it, and I'm not really going to get too far with it. I might get a little bit out of it. And I hear people all the time saying, I wish I hadn't have sold that module and I'd spent a bit more time with it and really sort of worked with it a little bit more and tried to pull some more magic out of it. I hear that a lot of the time. And I think people do need to spend more time with their equipment sometimes, rather than just keep moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I'm guilty of it though.
Yeah, we all are. I think, as Nathan said about just knowing the equipment and going back to the monitoring, just listen to a load of music. You know,
yeah,
that really is the way to do it. If you're gonna mix or go out live with HD 25s or whatever it is, don't just play live with those headphones and never put them on for anything else. Listen to all your favorite albums, listen to podcasts, listen to how they recreate the human voice, drum machines, jam with your equipment on it. You know, put a range of things through it, even watching TV shows through it. It's all going to just kind of subconsciously train your ear to be, that is this kind of sonic imprint of that piece.
Yeah.
That's how it should respond.
I would argue also this is a great reason to reach out to your friends who are also musicians who have different monitors and different rooms, and, you know, take your tracks around and listen to them in other environments. And it gives you some networking time, it gives you some hangout time, and all you're doing is just listening to your own music or reference tracks that you've listened to recently in your studio. And you can just start to extrapolate from there. You know, even as a mastering engineer, I sometimes will pay $70 an hour to go to other local studios to translate onto their massive, you know, PMCs or ATCs or other really big systems, just to continually remind myself of any biases that my room or my monitors have. So
yeah. What are you using live, Matt? I think that's what Nathan was asking before. So going out with a modular live, what's your plan for monitoring?
So my plan for monitoring is in-ears, and that's what I've done so far. And the gigs that I did last year, mainly in Brighton, it was all in ears. But I'm just using a pair of headphones at the minute. I do have some molded earbuds for when I go out and watching gigs, but I'm certainly going to get some of those molds made and use that. It just makes a lot of sense. I can get quite easily distracted, even if I'm on a big stage and I've got a big pumping sound system. I can easily get distracted if there's someone too close to me and they're chatting away too loud, or bottles being thrown behind the bar or something like that. It can put you off. I'd rather just zone out and be in the moment. Every now and then, though, I do take them out and kind of connect with that room again. I think that's an important thing to do. And you know, eye contact and stuff like that, try and even do that, but majority of the time, in earbuds. We've actually got a question in the chat room from Synthix, who's asking you guys about the mixers that you're using for playing live as well. I've got quite a strong opinion on this, but I'll leave it to you guys. And they're asking what would your preference be between the Bifaco and the WMD, which Nathan's got as well, and why you've gone for those out of interest.
Ooh, you go first, Nathan.
I was gonna have Matt go first, and then we can tell him why he's wrong. No,
okay. I mean, how long have you got? I mean, I went for the Hex Mix and the Hexpander. I went for these because a couple of reasons. Well, 3 auxiliaries, which is great. The WMD, my understanding is you can use 1 auxiliary at a time, which I was like, oh no. And I've got to have a reverb, I've got to have a delay, and I've got to have a third aux send, which might be distortion or something like that, and that I can just flick between. So that was a big one. The other one was the direct outputs. So I was able to send them straight to my DAW, and they are post fader. And this being a performance mixer, as I'm performing, I want to record my performances. So all the levels, all the EQ and everything gets tracked down into my DAW. I play it back and it sounds exactly as it was when I performed it. It's got these amazing little mutes, which you can kind of just sort of like turn them on and off. They're great. I think it sounds great. It's got a master EQ across the top as well. You've got the returns for the effects, which will go to the stereo mix. But I wish they had their own direct outputs. But hey, you know, that's the main reason. Otherwise, the WMD, I think it's great. They did build a D-sub output on it, so you can record the direct outs, but they are pre-fader, I believe.
Yeah.
The fact that you can only use one aux at a time for me was like, I think the expander and the hex mix is maybe just a little bit bigger as well than the WMD off the top of my head, but I could be wrong. That's my main reasons.
I'll jump in because I sit somewhere between the two as someone that has both. I used the WMD live when I did that yoga thing. I kind of wish I had the EQ of the Bafako and the Sens, but the WMD is a huge bank of VCAs. There's CV panning, there's CV level. That's not to be sniffed at. If you can take away a quad VCA from your system because you've got 8 of them on there, then that is a big deal. It is smaller than both the expander and the hex mix. It's more channels. I think you've an option. There's a stereo bus on it as well. There's like a 2 bus. There's like a master send and return. You know, if you want to strap a stereo compressor over it, or a master effect or filter, if you want to kind of DJ style like you would have on a DJ desk, high low pass kind of thing. Yeah, sonically, there's not much in it for the 2 of them. You can't do the post fader out thing, which is a shame. But I don't know. I'd probably change it up depending on the style I was doing. I think the kind of ambient droney stuff I was doing would have probably benefited from the EQ more than the extra channels and the CV, because I had all that in the system. But yeah, they're both very good. I'm not sure there's a right answer to this. Maybe Nathan can argue that the WMD is right, and you can argue the Bafako, Matt.
No, I absolutely agree. There is no right or wrong. I think for me, I'm trying to think of what else to build upon from what Ben said. I think for me also, for doing a really long live sets on the WMD, every channel has 2 inputs. So if you don't need to use them at the same time, you can completely have a completely different patch just by taking your fingers and just flicking down the A inputs down to the B inputs, and then it's completely different.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So over time, for longer extended pieces where you're managing more than 8 voices, that was a selling point for me. I already have a whole WMD output section with a pro output and the muscle compressor. So it kind of went well there. And also I'm a fader guy. As you can tell, like I'm, with harmonic oscillators, right. All these things all have sliders. And the way I perform, I need to change. This is just, again, no right or wrong. This is just my style. I always am changing multiple values at once. And since I have 10 fingers, I can change up to 10 values at once with faders, which I can't do with knobs.
Absolutely.
So that's just a subjective thing that led me in the other direction.
The 2 input thing, even just really simply for drums, having 2 kicks, an A kick and a B kick on the same channel. You can mix as well because it's a 3-position switch.
True.
Channel 2 might be a snare and then a clap, and you're moving between snare and clap being the backbeat, and then both of them on at once. Yeah, that's a big thing actually with that.
We just need WMD and Bafako to get in bed and have babies that make the perfect amalgamation of everything that we want. I think we're still yet to really crack it in the modular world for the ultimate mixer, but I suppose it's each to your own, and use them how you want. I'm really interested to see if someone like Pioneer might be interested in doing something where they're taking their traditional kind of DJ desk and maybe not necessarily implementing CV input into it, but looking at how or what our desires are as modular performers, and seeing if they can integrate that into some of the functionality. I suppose the people that are doing it really good at the minute is the Model 1 by
Play Differently.
Yeah, which is great because you've just got all that filtering on it.
Aren't those all RCA ins though?
Yes, I think so.
So close.
I know, yeah, and I think there's a mod. I've seen a mod that you can put onto it as well, so you can get direct outputs and record onto it. It's heavy and it's very expensive to carry around as well. So again, you got to think about that.
Yeah, and certainly mixing in your rack is unbelievably convenient and so the most expensive way to do it.
Yeah,
yeah.
You know, the other option would just be if you have the time and the physical strength, you know, just get a Soundcraft or Allen and Heath or Mackie mixer and get one of those NW2S IO units.
Yeah,
and then like shove all that stuff out line level and then just mix outside of the box. I think a lot of us though love the idea of, especially in the world of underground music, you show up, you open the case, you get power and stereo outs to the front of house, and you're done. You're ready to play.
I'll tell you, this was the module I bought initially to be my mixer, which is the ER301. I thought I would buy this because it's got so many inputs, and you can use CV and on audio for the majority of the inputs, I believe. And then you've got 4 outputs. I thought what I would actually do is send all my audio, my bass, all my different oscillators into here, and then use CV control to effectively internally change the volumes by setting up a virtual mixer within it. And it would also allow me to put compression on it, EQ, reverbs, delays, and that kind of stuff all in one. Didn't quite work out for a number of reasons. And I felt it almost pulled me away too much as well from being, you want that certain element of performance, I think, when you're mixing, and you need to be able to grab stuff, and whether that's using your 5-10 fingers on faders and that kind of thing, or you just need more of a tactile response to your mixing. It removed me too much away from that. So didn't quite work out. Still yet to really figure out what I'm doing with it.
Imagine if, and I've fed this one out to a couple of companies that haven't gone with it, nor is it anything that's under NDA or in development that I'm aware of. Imagine if someone like Electron or anyone else, but this is how I've pitched it to a few people, made something like an Octatrack, but you strip out all the sampling, just have a few big faders, you know, plenty of inputs, but not every input necessarily needs to have a fader. Maybe it's 4 or 8 faders. But maybe more than that in terms of input, and the ability to do the parameter locking thing over basic mixing functions. Make a high quality mixing environment, take away the sampling. It's not for that device in my mind, and be able to, almost like you do on scenes on a digital live console. I have an X32 here. I've got various scenes. If I want to go behind me and jam on my keyboards, I hit scene 2. If I'm doing a demo, which is majority of my work, I hit scene 1. It pulls up my mic and my stereo from the modular. If I'm multi-tracking modular, I hit scene 3, and then the whole desk is saved in scenes and settings. That would be really cool. Something tactile. You could modulate the panning, some basic EQ and filtering, levels in a Electron style box. I've not pitched it to Electron.
Or maybe you just did.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know them well enough to kind of open up these conversations and then maybe listen. I did do some patches for the Digitone actually, so there are doors open, and I'm sure other people have thought of this. And I've spoke to a few companies, but someone said, why don't you just build a motorized fader box? And it was like, well, it's not necessarily what I'm getting at, but it was a relevant point. What happens when you change the scene and all the levels change? because then you've got that kind of digital control thing of how does it behave? Does it pick up the value as you move the fader or the slider through it? Does it snap to it, which on a mixer would probably be very bad? If the scene has a level control right at the bottom, say 1 out of 10 in terms of its level, but you've got the fader all the way up from the previous one and it snaps up to full volume, there's a lot of kind of issues and why that's not an easy thing just to throw together. But it's got to be out there, this like high performance animatable mixing environment for modular or desktop or doorless jamming or whatever.
If there are any manufacturers out there who make desks, get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to give you some feedback on this, I'm sure, and let's prototype something. I don't know, maybe there'll be something at NAMM in January or something like that.
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, if any manufacturer just released a mixer where every single channel just had a minus 20 dB pad, it would instantly be compatible with modular.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So something that simple would go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, talking about new modules as well, I am just going to share this, and this is something that is under Kickstarter at the moment. It's something that I've actually backed. It's not a mixer, but it could be a mixer in that you can send audio signals into it. But this is the micro super signal processor, the MSSP by Percussor. Now, they do a big boy version of this, which got funded, I think, earlier this year or last year.
Yep.
And they've decided to make this smaller version, essentially. And it's super powerful. I'm just sharing it now because it's got 6 days to go on Kickstarter. And if you're thinking of, if you're wanting essentially a module that can do pads, it can do FM, it can do granular, it can do drums, it can basically do what the ER301 does. My understanding, it's got a more powerful computer. It's got USB inputs into it as well. I think you've got 4 outputs and 8 CV audio inputs into it. There's some really cool demos that have just been shown as well, that have just been added to the Kickstarter for the 4-voice. This thing is, $549 US. But me and Ben was talking about this before we came on air, just about how much this can do. And it actually also comes in with a Mac and Windows editor for building your own patches. So, if you want to actually plug an LFO into a delay in a particular way, you can do that now.
They went with a tagline, and I know it rubbed a few people up the wrong way, of the most powerful Euro rack module.
Yeah.
And that, you can imagine why that did rub certain people up the wrong way. But they just meant in terms of specs, it's a quad-core processor on that thing. I think it's one of, if not the highest spec ARM processors available.
Yeah, 1.8 gigahertz.
Yeah, 1.8 gigahertz quad core processor. The potential, and I think this is really what they need to really get people excited. People need to hear what that power lets them do. I know Matt Lange, great producer, does quite a bit of techno and various other things, guitar, some of his vocals on his work. He was saying that nothing in modular was as good as software, just computer software for granular yet. He says you compare it to a great reactor ensemble and it's just, we're nowhere near yet, and it's a RAM and processing issue. This would get around that because it is running a decent spec computer processor effectively. It almost kind of needs, I don't know, a team around it, maybe, of people that can build these, or I'm not quite sure what, but these really high performance, kind of latency free, make it sound like a Big Sky or an Eventide Space. I think it's capable. It seems to have the specs that if either SSP themselves, Percussor themselves, or working with someone else, they can get some really good high quality effects and kind of sound engines on there. Something like that could run Serum, the X for Record soft synth. Put that in a module and Jesus Christ, there's a hell of a lot of power.
Yeah, you can load VSTs into this, is my understanding.
It's
well.
crazy. I mean, look at
Yeah.
what like Paul Schreiber does as synthesis technology and the power. The E370 has been a real module of the year for me. It's amazing. This is way more powerful. So maybe people haven't seen the potential, or there's just not enough for them to back it at this stage. I do hope it's successful. I think there's a lot to come from it.
Yeah, it's anyone thinking of starting to get into modular and they go, what should be my first module? I think this is a good all-rounder. It is expensive, but I mean, if you think about what's in there, you've got the oscillators and you've got envelopes and you've got delays and effects and crazy modulation, and you can have multiple instances of things running. You're getting a lot in there. Now, I know also there's some people who think, well, this kind of pulls away and detracts from the, you buy one module that does one thing kind of thing, and this is a computer, and you're putting a computer in modular world. Well, I'm sorry, a lot of the modules you're buying are digital as well that are out there. This may be digital, but it sounds great. It's very flexible, and it does a hell of a lot for what you're getting. I'm not in any way endorsed by Percussa or anything like that. I have backed this. I put my own money into this. I hope it does get funded. And there's only 6 days to go. I haven't even told them we'd mention it on today's show, but I just thought I would, because I also think Kickstarter is a great way as well for people out there making modules to kind of gauge the water about, is this going to be successful? How much you're going to pay for it. When it's going to be ready, what you're going to be buying and what you're going to get with it. And I think Kickstarter is a really good way of doing things. Modal Electronics did it recently with Sculpt. So yeah, good luck to them. I hope they get this one across the line.
Yeah, likewise. I've no endorsement or arrangement with them at all for anything. But even if this isn't successful, it, as you said, Kickstarter's great in that it allows them to gauge whether they should have fronted all the money anyway. Because if it's not successful, I'd hate to think of someone like Percussa or anyone else fronting all this money, losing out on a lot, and then not being in a position to continue with their ideas. Because I think this is an interesting idea. Whether the market's ready for it or not now, maybe not. If it's not successful, maybe they will be in another year or so, but it allows them to not front all this cash and effectively push them out of the scene, and maybe even be kind of dismayed by the whole experience. I've had some great Kickstarter experiences. I know some others haven't, but I think people don't like Kickstarter when people are funding things that they just know are going to sell and they don't need much money for. I've seen people get really annoyed when they're like, look, just front a few $1,000s and just get it off the ground. Sometimes it's clearly just a marketing campaign. And then when much bigger companies do it and it's clearly just a marketing strategy, some people like it because they think I can get in early. There's maybe a discount. Obviously, buy it now and save $200 is a great thing for a lot of people, but I know that annoys people as well. I've had good experiences on Kickstarter though. And I think we need these people around with these ideas. My only worry with that Percussa module is potentially the power draw. Is there a reason that no one else is running these quad-core processors in your ORAC?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, mate.
Sure. maybe not. But again, that's I don't know if they've put that across. That may be an unfair comment. Maybe that's in the Kickstarter campaign and I've just missed it.
I will bet you that I actually own an analog module that actually has a higher power draw than even the most hungry digital modules.
Is it Metasonics?
No, actually, let me dig it out. Nope. Hold on. Believe it or not, it's the only one of its kind in the world. Bug brand DRM1.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a little thick too, but
wow.
So
why is that pulling so much power?
It's not designed to draw from Eurorack power rails, and I think it's like
kind of hacked to do so and needs a ton of current.
So I forget what the specs are off the top of my head, but Chris from used to be Nidstrument, now it's Million Machines March, did the conversion to Eurorack for me on this one, and
yeah,
this is the kick drum to end all kick drums in my book. It's just no room right now.
Yeah, bug brand would be another big rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, dangerous.
Okay, gents. Well, look, I'm mindful of the time. We've been on air now for nearly 2 hours, and so I guess we'll wrap it up. Thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your patching techniques and your ideas, and also just to have these chats and give back to the community, and for people to join us as well in the chat room. So thanks so much. I know you've been really busy. What have you got coming up, Nathan, between now and Christmas? You trying to wrap a few things up?
Yeah, still have some mastering projects I'm trying to finish up for the end of the year, which is always fun, and just always makes me smile how much talent there is in the world. It's a very life affirming kind of gig. But other than that, I'm preparing at least 3 known album releases for next year. So those are starting to get mastered and packaged and designed and all that good stuff. But other than that, just kind of sliding into the holidays and looking forward to 2019.
Great, man. Thank you so much again, Nathan. Really, really great to finally chat with you on air. Maybe I'll hopefully see you if I make it across the US in 2019.
Absolutely.
And Ben, thanks again. Thanks for everything you've done up until this point. You're a big center point of the community. It feels like with your attitude towards the modular community, and obviously the work you've been doing and working tirelessly. For those of you have spoken to, for those that have spoken to you outside of all of this, we know how busy you are with things and how much time this all takes. And please do go and support both Ben and Nathan. I know, Ben, you've got your Patreon as well, which really helps support you. So please do go check that out, and obviously check out Ben's channels and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just taking the question you asked Nathan about what's coming up, a ton of videos. I have a lot to fit in before the end of the year, and with one of the new AGH modules that was at SynthFest. And we're going to put. We were talking about. I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of the companies. Is that point between Christmas and New Year good or bad for uploading videos? There's a lot of arguments for, well, people are at home, they've got time off work, they maybe have money to spend. So I've funnily been kind of dotting around videos, thinking which one's most effective. For those that don't know, I've left a lot of my work recently to continue pursuing doing this. This is the majority of my week doing these demos, which is amazing. The fact that the scene can support me doing this, and Patreon's a big part of that as well in terms of steady income. I have a kid and a house to pay for. Being sent gear doesn't pay for anything, but I'm really fortunate to be in a position of this is the majority of what I'm doing. And the support out there is what spurs it on. But yeah, a ton of videos, some stuff on the TikTok ZDSP, some new AGH modules, the SSSR Labs Matrix Charter. I'm not quite sure how to say it. I need to check. A Switch Matrix. A ton of other stuff that's in there that I'm probably forgetting about. But yeah, a lot of videos to come. And I'm just planning out the next year for me as well. I'm doing a lot of live streams myself, which I've taken a little bit of a break from for various reasons, and kind of planning out the schedule for the new year. I want to hit January and sort of tell people, right, every month you will get one video from this series, one of these live streams, and one of this. So people kind of expect, all right, it's the first weekend of the month, he's going to do this or that. Build up some expectation and kind of put more irons in fires and things. So awesome, yeah, man. Planning on a ton of videos, usual stuff.
Great, and yeah, wish you all the best with that, and to you, Nathan, and hope you both have a great Christmas. This was our Christmas special, 16th of December. I know a bit early. I'll try and do some jamming over Christmas as well. I'll get this on, and I'll do some more live streams as well on that. I've got some news coming up as well about my releases, and actually also some rebranding, changing my artist name and things like this, which I'm going to be announcing soon, along with a few other little surprises. So stay tuned for all of that. Don't know if it's a good idea or not at this stage.
No, congrats, that's exciting.
Just come up with a different name. That's all.
Yeah, before you wrap up, Matt, you've just done a little bit of it anyway, but you mentioned your vinyl double A side coming out. What's kind of immediate in the new year for you?
Yeah, so that'll be coming out. So that comes out on an imprint from Fat Cat Records, FCR, which is basically their techno label. Fat Cat started out pretty much as an electronic music label. So there's that. I'm also upping the game a little bit and changing stuff around in here to do just high quality live streams. Going to be also reaching out to and doing stuff on Twitch. I'm getting a lot of people asking me to go over and do things on that. The EP that I'm working on as well, which will be coming out mid next year, which will also feature a little bit of a tour, which I'll be announcing. Some live gigs all around the UK, and also I've got a couple abroad, which I'll be announcing as well to go out and play live with this stuff. I'll also be trying to do some Q&As at these gigs as well. So anyone who comes along, there'll be an opportunity actually after or before the performance where we can chat and go through how things are configured and that kind of thing, and have a couple of beers. There's some other stuff that I can't talk about as well, which I'm really excited about. But basically just pushing the music now, just getting back into that. I've been doing a lot of live streaming and a lot of kind of finding my feet, finding my voice over the past couple of years. And I've really got a lot of content now, audio content that I'm able to put out there. Also collaborating with some great visual artists, both stills and moving image as well, because we know how all important that is as well. So
and let's not forget that you run a university level music production course as well. You mentioned me and Nathan like not knowing how we fit it all in. You run a degree.
Yeah, I do. I'm the course leader for a BA honours degree in music production at the British and Irish Modern Music Institute here in Brighton. We've got one in Brighton, Bristol, London, Manchester, Birmingham, Berlin, Dublin, and yeah, that keeps me busy. That's my full-time job. Before that, I worked in studios in London. I've worked with some great artists, like Nick Cave and some great engineers that I've engineered for, and producers that I've engineered for, and all that kind of stuff. I got a bit fed up of sleeping under the mixing desk most evenings and eating poor food and not seeing my friends and stuff. So teaching was a great thing for me to move into. So that takes the majority of my time. But that's me giving stuff back to the students, and also it's great to have that relationships with the students and finding out what's current and what they're getting into and learning from that as well. It's kind of like
if it's a great course and institution, it fuels that motivation. You don't leave work thinking, "Oh, I'm not turning anything on. I've had a really rubbish day." If you're fueled by kind of young minds and inspiration and ideas, and you've been able to share some creativity yourself, it fuels the practice, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It inspires me when I'm hearing to a student's track and I'm thinking, God, this is great. And I'm seeing them going out and playing tour. We go to Glastonbury and we put a stage on there, and we have our students playing there. It only spurs me on to go, okay, well, I want to be doing this as well, very much so. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Ben. It does do that.
Last thing. I've one really exciting thing to release that I can't talk about, but it will solve. I'm not even going to say what it is, but you can probably guess at least what kind of thing it is. It will solve a lot of issues and be very useful for live performance and a lot of the things that both you, Matt, and Nathan have talked about this evening. I was hoping it would see the light of day this year, but just this idea I've had and getting it done properly. Start of the year, there'll be something different from DivKid. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, okay. That's a bit of a bombshell.
Yeah. Let's end it on that. Close the chat.
Drop the mic. Bang. Okay. Well, look, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. And if there's anyone watching this out there who wants to join us on future ones, get in touch. Drop me an email. I'm reaching out to people and just asking, hey, do you want to come and jump on the show? Just if you've got a camera and you've got your modular set up and you can talk about things, you're welcome to join us. It'd be really great. thanks so much. This is our 4th episode. It feels like I've done a million of these already. And everyone in the chat room, like Inky and Paul who join us, and Darren. And thanks for everyone for your questions. So I've not got back to everyone on there. I'll try and go through them as I go through it. Please do share this, like, subscribe, all of that, just to let me know that if you want any more of this. I enjoy doing it. It's great. I get to hang out with cool guys and chat nerdy stuff. So it keeps me out of trouble. That's the way I see it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Ben. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, everyone in the chat room. Have a great Christmas, and look out for some live streams over Christmas. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.